Hey, it's Ray Steele. Hope you like this, and please hit the subscribe button. Appreciate it. Political insiders are back with some stuff to talk about. Election related, even though it's still more than 2 months away. What else are we going to talk about? Brian Gaddie, my Democrat, who's with me in studio today, along with Abdul Hakim Shabazz, IndyPolitics.org, and Republican Ali Bartlett joining us as well. Welcome, everybody. Let's dive right into it. Before we get to elections, let's talk about some things that might implicate or have an influence on the election. And that would be something that the president did this week. President Biden finally came out after much talking, much hemming and hawing, according to some on the left, with his student loan debt forgiveness plan. $10,000, up to $10,000 in loan forgiveness for individuals making up to $125,000, $20,000 in forgiveness if you were lower income and received a Pell Grant. Depending on who you are, this is either being praised or criticized. Before we get into the politics of it, though, Abdul, got a feeling that you'll have something to say perhaps about inflation and its potential.
Well, actually, with this one, not necessarily, my friend.
Okay,
this one's a little bit different because you get all the inflationary pressure when we pump new money into the economy and the government starts printing more money. This is money that's sort of already there. And instead of sending the money to the student loan, the VN or whoever, you're just basically keeping the money yourself. So I don't think necessarily the inflationary pressure will be that much on this particular move. However, I do think it doesn't. I think the president plans fall short of two things. Number one, it does bring down the cost of college. So I teach college, start teaching next Monday. It does bring down the cost. And number two, I don't think we do enough to tell students how to avoid racking up so much debt. Like, for example, take 15 hours instead of 12 hours. And, that sort of thing. Get out of college in 4 years instead of 5 or 6. Those type of things can mitigate having to take out so much debt and so much student loans.
Ali, some of the criticism from Republicans has been that this isn't fair to people who may have paid off their student loans already or who didn't incur student loan debt while they were in college. But also some of the criticism has come from elected officials who, just a few years ago, were okay with tax cuts for people who make a whole lot more money than frankly, Brian and I do. I'm not going to assume what anyone's income is here, but at the same time, the accusation would be hypocrisy, saying tax breaks are okay for certain people, but a cut in student loan payments and student loan obligations is not fair.
Yeah, so let me start with the first part there. I can't say that I've heard this, from a more diverse audience than the feedback I've heard about this student loan action by President Biden. I've heard this from Democrat friends, Republican friends, people who've paid off their loans, people who benefited from this. I mean, what message are we sending here to everyone who either made sacrifices up front to avoid debt, people who made decisions like going into the military or public service after school to pay off their debt or to avoid debt altogether, or to people who just worked really hard and paid off their debt before everyone else? I mean, I just don't understand the logic behind this. I don't understand the fairness. If we really want to talk about politicians who made comments on this, I think we're talking about tax breaks and debt relief, which are completely different things. I don't really see the correlation at all. We can get into the details of that. But at the end of the day, what happened here is that we're telling a certain group of people that they're allowed to just eliminate $10,000 of debt that hardworking Americans made choices in their lives to avoid. Those people didn't make the same choices, and they may not have had the same circumstances, but this is a very diverse audience of people that are angry about this, and rightfully so.
And the same could be said about those who seem to be in favor of this, because, Brian, student lending has been seen, at least in some circles, particularly when it comes to students of color, as predatory in some cases.
Absolutely. So many students of color have to take out loans in order to be able to go to college or grad school or law school or business school. And the fact is that a lot of students of color are in debt because of that. And I really believe President Biden just did a courageous move. I mean, this is politically courageous. I know that he's getting blowback from not just people in our party, but especially the Republicans which I find completely disingenuous. You Republicans don't seem to have a problem when millionaires and billionaires are getting tax cuts and tax breaks. But all of a sudden, when working class and middle class young people are getting debt, being alleviated from the debt burden, is keeping many of them from starting families, starting homes. All of a sudden, oh my goodness, the world's coming to an end. It's just hypocrisy, and you Republicans really need to just quit with the being disingenuous here. This is really going to have an effect of helping so many young people get their lives back from a financial standpoint. And for those people who paid off their debts, I mean, that's great. But what about those people who are struggling under a mountain of debt? I think President Biden heard those voters, and he heard the pain and felt their pain. And I'm glad he stepped up and did what he did. It was a very courageous political move by President Biden, and I applaud him for it, no doubt about it.
Well, if I may follow up with that, if it were so politically courageous, Brian, why did it take him so long to come up with this policy? Because this was a campaign promise, and yet we didn't have this policy until 70 days or thereabouts before a midterm election, in which it looked like Democrats were not going to do too well.
Well, it's an election season. I know people will say, well, he only did it for political reasons, which I'm pretty sure that was probably part of the calculus in making the decision he made. But the fact is, he made the decision, and I think that him making that decision is very politically courageous. And knowing that he was going to get blowback for it, he still did it anyway. Just the fact that so many working class and middle class families have been their debt has been alleviated, and the debt has been lessened because of this. I just think really President Biden should be applauded for this move, no doubt about it.
Well, let's talk about the potential electoral implications, not just of this, but of everything else going on. Since elections are going to be here before we know it, Abdul, I know you had a conversation with our political scientist friend Andy Downs at Purdue Fort Wayne this week about the outlook both statewide and locally. Don't know how much the student loan decision is going to have as an impact as an individual issue, but Democrats, whether at the state level or at the national level, seem a lot more optimistic now based on the Dobbs decision on abortion by the Supreme Court than they did just a few months ago.
Now, I actually think the Dobbs decision will have the biggest impact on these midterm elections. Democrats are actually they won in I want to say New York Congressional Special District number 19, I think is the district number where Democrats won. That's sort of a barometer for what happens. Barack Obama won it, Donald Trump won it, Joe Biden won it. So that's sort of been a barometer district to keep an eye on. Also, when you throw in the fact, you have Kansas out there, you also have Democrats kind of closing some of those margins. Republicans are sort of having to scramble a little bit. So I think the Dobbs decision will have more impact. Now here in Indiana, perhaps not so much maybe in some of those suburban districts, Hamilton, Boone County, Dobbs will come into play, and also may come into play in the Secretary of State's race in a weird way, because Destiny Wells has actually been reaching out to Republicans who are upset at the Republican Party over their abortion moves.
Ali, what are Republicans thinking right now? I saw Abdul had another story about some polling that was done in State Senator Kyle Walker's district. To refresh people's memory, Senator Walker took one of the more moderate positions on restricting abortion in Indiana during the most recent special session, even though what ended up passing was much more strict than what he favored. And it seems that he is in a tight race with a Democrat that, frankly, not a lot of people have heard of, not even those of us who follow politics quite a bit right now. What are Republicans thinking about the midterms right now, and what message are you trying to send at a time when, at least nationally, there seems to be some momentum toward the Democrats?
Well, first and foremost, Kyle Walker's district has always been one that could be, a competitive district in some way. So that one isn't, the most representative of the whole state. I understand why, the spotlight would be on that race, but I do want to point out that that's a competitive race no matter what. As far as what everything looks like going into the midterms, I actually think that student loan forgiveness was very good for Republicans. It gives us the momentum when we just came off the tough abortion issue. At this point, I was just having this conversation with someone the other day. I think there is so much on both sides that could be called for criticism that, in my opinion, what we're going to see is people not deviating from their typical voting patterns. I think there are criticisms available on both sides at this point. And because of that, because of the way they keep stacking up, I'm not sure we're going to see people really deviate from what they would typically do. I think there are some individual races, especially here in the state. I think Abdul just mentioned one of them where we could see a shift that we wouldn't normally see. But aside from that, I'm not of the opinion that we're going to see a lot change in people's typical voting habits. Do I think we're going to see something of a red wave at the national level? I do. But do I think that people's day-to-day voting habits in a smaller scale in the state of Indiana are going to change? I don't think so.
All right, Brian, red wave nationally. I guess Ali called it there.
The red wave is fizzled out, Ali. Sorry. The polls show it. If you look nationally, the enthusiasm gap is closed between us Democrats and you all on the GOP side. We're really fired up about this election as Democrats because look at what happened with the Dobbs decision. A woman's right to choose has been stripped away from American women all across the United States. And we Democrats are really enthusiastic about this election. So then you also look at the fundraising numbers. I mean, in many respects, we are outraising you all when it comes to fundraising. There's several states, especially in the U.S. Senate races, like I'll just give you an example, Pennsylvania. Your party is pulled out of those races. Our candidate, Mr. Tom McDermott, is doing well here in Indiana. So overall, I really like the way we're doing as Democrats in this election. I think we're going to hold the Senate. We're going to even gain seats in the Senate. I think we're going to hold the House. I think we're going to defy history. I think often the party in power, which obviously is us because we've got the White House, President Biden, but the party in power usually loses seats in the first midterm election of the president. Well, we're going to defy history. We're going to not only keep the Senate, we're going to gain Senate seats, and we're going to also hold the House.
Well, even if that happens, no disrespect, Brian, no disrespect to Mr. McDermott, but Ali Abdul, I think Senator Young is going to be tough to beat this November, it would seem.
Yeah, I think the odds are in Todd Young's favor. I like Tom McDermott; he's a good friend, but I think the dynamics of Indiana favor Tom McDermott. One thing we are going to do some polling in politics probably the end of September, so we have a much better idea of what the lay of the land is going to look like. We're going to poll the U.S. Senate race, Secretary of State's race, and the Marion County Prosecutor's race. So that's for the end of September. For results to be released in early October. So we'll see, my friend. We'll see.
All right, we shall. And we will talk again very soon to our insiders, Brian Gaddie, Abdul Hakim Shabazz, Ali Bartlett. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.